In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on January 11, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. New Jersey Devils versus Winnipeg Jets. Winnipeg finally comes into a game looking a little more like itself, and you can feel that shift without even seeing a stat sheet. They just snapped that ugly 11-game winless stretch with a 5-1 beating of the Kings at home, a night where the big names actually finished plays and the whole building sounded less like a funeral and more like a party again. That kind of release matters, especially for a group that has spent weeks hearing how broken they are, because one convincing win can flip the mood in a locker room faster than any whiteboard session. On the other side, New Jersey shows up carrying a very different kind of baggage. They were blown out 9-0 by the Islanders, followed that with a 4-1 loss in Pittsburgh, and that adds up to a 13-1 goal difference over 2 games that is hard to shrug off as just a bad bounce or two. That is the kind of week where every mistake feels louder, every shift feels heavier, and even simple plays can start to look complicated because everyone is gripping the stick a little too tight. Schedule-wise, the Devils are grinding through their 3rd straight road stop in 5 days, which is not exactly a spa itinerary. Meanwhile, the Jets get them in a home matinee where the crowd has that weekend buzz, the kids in jerseys are loud, and the home bench usually gets a little extra jump from that early start energy. It is not a number you can plug into a model, but anyone who has watched those afternoon games knows they can feel weird and emotional, and that often helps the side that just rediscovered a bit of swagger. Now the interesting part is that, over a full season, New Jersey still looks like the more polished build on paper. But right now they are walking into this one with a forward group held together by tape and patience. Stefan Noesen is headed for knee surgery and parked on injured reserve. Zach McEwen is done for the season after ACL surgery. And that chips away at their bottom 6 and their flexibility up front. On the blue line, they are scratching a high-end puck mover and Dougie Hamilton is a healthy scratch, sliding Jonathan Kovacevic back in for his first action after off-season knee surgery, and asking that group to immediately look organized in front of a road crowd that would love an early mistake. Winnipeg's picture is a lot more straightforward. Their top 6 is basically intact, with Kyle Connor and Mark Scheifele on the first line and Jonathan Toews and Gabriel Vilardi driving the second, so their main offensive pieces are not just available, they are settled into clear roles. Connor Hellebuyck is back from knee surgery and has already had time to knock the rust off, which gives them their backbone in net again rather than another patchwork solution. In front of him, this group still wants to play a straightforward, hard forecheck style that suits a loud home rink, and after that 11-game skid, there is a very real sense of we owe these fans a proper run, hanging over every shift. From a market point of view, the books are still posting Winnipeg as only a modest favorite, roughly in that -120 moneyline range, with the Jets laying the puck line and New Jersey catching the goal and a half. So the pricing still treats this like something close to a coin toss, even though one team arrives with most of its main pieces available, a fresh emotional lift from that Kings game, and the other arrives tired, banged up, and trying to patch a blue line that just gave up a 9 spot earlier in the week. If you are just asking whose current form, health, and situation lean heavier in this particular afternoon at this particular rink, the scale tilts toward the home bench by a clear but not cartoonish margin. As our first pick for this matchup, the Winnipeg Jets money line is our full game side pick. The total is sitting at 5.5 with the over slightly juiced, which is the market's way of saying, we see goals here, but we are not ready to call this a full track meet. Season long, these two have played a lot of nights where the combined score lands somewhere in that mid-5 to around 6 goal pocket, so the number is not coming out of thin air. Here is the thing though, the recent storylines push harder toward chaos than control. New Jersey just had that 9-0 humiliation on Long Island and then only one goal in Pittsburgh, and teams that have been dragged through that kind of week almost never show up looking to win a neat 2-1 chess match. Usually the response is we need to prove we can score again, and with a top line of Jack Hughes, Nico Hischier, and Jesper Bratt all in the lineup, there is enough talent on the ice to try exactly that. Add in Evgeny Dadonov expected back from his wrist issue to deepen the bottom of the forward group, and you have a coaching staff that suddenly has one more veteran shooter to throw over the boards when things open up. Winnipeg is not exactly a defensive monastery either. They have allowed more than they have scored so far this season, and even with Hellebuck back in the crease, there are still breakdowns that force him to clean up messes that should never have reached the slot in the first place. Their penalty kill sits in that high 70s range, which is not a disaster but definitely not the kind of just take a penalty, we will be fine unit that lets you sleep easy. Across from them, the Devils bring a power play that has been sitting a little above 20%, and Winnipeg's own man advantage lives in that middle band just under that mark. So both units are good enough to punish loose discipline without needing some kind of miracle performance. When you stack that on top of the psychological piece, it starts to look like one of those games where both teams are more afraid of another flat night than they are of trading chances. The Jets finally have a little confidence back and are at home, so they are not going to shy away from pushing for a multi-goal showing in front of their own fans. The Devils, after being dragged on highlight reels for that Islanders result all week, have every reason to open the throttle and chase a 3 or 4 goal statement just to feel normal again. Winnipeg home games and New Jersey road games have already tended to live around that 6-goal neighborhood, so a 3-2 type finish is absolutely alive, but so are scorelines where one side gets to 4 or 5 and the other still chips in more than a token reply. When you put all of that together, you end up with a matchup where the realistic ways this plays out lean more toward the number getting pushed upward than quietly sneaking under. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Pittsburgh Penguins versus Boston Bruins. This matchup in Boston has that fun little emotional whiplash baked in already. You have the home crowd still buzzing from a 10-2 demolition of the Rangers, and casual bettors scrolling their phones thinking, well, that team again, please. On the other side, you have Pittsburgh walking in after a tight 2-1 loss to Calgary, the kind of game that annoys a locker room more than a plain blowout, because they were right there and still walked out empty-handed. Here is the thing, when you then look at the board and see Pittsburgh listed as a small road favorite, with Boston sitting only a touch into underdog territory at home, that is the market basically saying, nice fireworks, but we still trust the other guys a little more over 60 minutes. Books are not in the business of getting sentimental about one huge scoreline or one highlight reel afternoon, and the fact that they nudge the Penguins into the favorite slot, even in this building, tells you a lot about how these two teams are being graded over the bigger sample, not just over the last 24 hours. Pittsburgh's recent run has felt like one of those stretches where everything is not perfect, but it is stable. They drop one to Calgary, sure, but it snaps a strong streak rather than continuing a slide, and that matters mentally for a team flying out for a big game the very next day. You get that we owe ourselves a response energy, which shows up in the details, in cleaner changes, in less lazy penalties, in the kind of focus that does not trend on social media but absolutely shifts a one-goal game. Boston, right now, feels more like emotional whiplash in Jersey form. Longer stretches of up and down results, then suddenly 10 goals on the board, hats flying, everyone talking about history and records again. Those games are fun, they look incredible on TikTok, but they also create a very natural hangover spot the next night when it is no longer a celebration and you are asked to lock back into structure against a serious opponent that just got punched in the ego by Calgary. Let me explain why that matters for the spread. If you are backing a favorite, especially on the road, you want a team that can handle mood swings and still play their game, rather than a group that rides the emotional elevator up and down. Everything we are seeing and how the market has priced this one, plus how these two teams have been trending overall, points to Pittsburgh being treated as the steadier, more repeatable version of themselves, while Boston is treated as a little more volatile, even at home. It is not that the Bruins cannot romp again. They clearly can. We just watched it. It is that the likelier script across a full game, in a big divisional spotlight, favors the team the books already shaded as the stronger side. So when you line up the emotional angle, the recent form, the way the odds are written, and the fact that the Penguins walk in with something to prove rather than something to celebrate, the case leans in one direction. As our first pick for this matchup, the Pittsburgh Penguins money line is our full game side pick. The total number sitting out there is 6.5, with the under carrying the extra juice and the over hovering around even money, and that alone tells you how nervous the books are about another goal explosion. They are basically saying, we know these teams can turn this into chaos, but we are daring you to say it happens again tonight. We just watched Boston hang 10 in one afternoon, and that is not a normal box score, that is a fever dream. Even if you strip the opponent names off the page and only look at that kind of scoring output, it hints at a style that has opened up, with more chances going both directions and not a lot of appetite for a low-event snooze fest. You do not score 10 by accident, you usually need pace, mistakes, and a little bit of let's see what happens if we push this rush too. On the other side, Pittsburgh comes in from a 2-1 game that actually tells you a lot about their scoring potential. They pushed late, generated chances, had a would-be tying goal waved off, and still walked away with a single tally. That kind of loss is less about not being able to create offense and more about small margins, hot goaltending, and a couple of bounces that refuse to cooperate. Offenses like that rarely stay quiet for long, especially when they jump straight into a building that just watched the home team light the scoreboard on fire the day before. Back to the game script for a second. Both teams played yesterday, which means the legs are a little heavier and the mental focus is a little softer, and that usually shows up first in defensive reads rather than shooting touch. Defenders react a half-second slower, sticks are not quite in the right lanes, gaps widen just enough for shooters to find space, and the whole thing starts to look like late-night pickup hockey with elite talent. You still get skill, you just get more broken plays feeding that skill, and those are the plays that turn into odd-man rushes and backdoor tap-ins. Honestly, you can feel how this one could tilt into one of those games where a 2-goal lead never feels safe. You have a home team coming off a scoring carnival, a road team unhappy with how yesterday ended, and both sides skating into a national spotlight with a big number hanging on the total. That is the kind of recipe where even if the first period starts a little slow, all it takes is one power play goal, one defensive breakdown, and suddenly the entire pace loosens up as both benches decide, fine, if it is going to be that kind of night, we are going to trade chances too. When you add that emotional context to how the total has been priced, with the under respected but the ceiling set high, the most natural storyline is not a tight 3-2 grind. It is a game that lives in that wild middle, where 6.5 feels more like a challenge than a cap. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Columbus Blue Jackets versus Utah Mammoth. Columbus rolls into Salt Lake City looking a little wobbly, sitting at 18-19-7 after getting blanked 4-0 in Denver by a Colorado team that is steamrolling the league right now, and that is not exactly the kind of confidence boost you want before you climb into altitude again for one more night on the road. They are at the bottom of the Metropolitan, which is one of those things you can almost feel in the way a team plays late in games, a bit of that here we go again energy when they fall behind by a goal. Utah, on the other hand, sits at 22-22-3, fourth in the Central, and they come into this one on a 3-game win streak, all of it backed by a pretty lively building that still feels like a new toy for the fan base and a group that clearly enjoys being the fresh face in the league. Here is where the numbers quietly back up what your eyes would suspect if you watched these two for a week. Utah is scoring right around 3 goals a night and giving up a bit under that, with a goal differential sitting at +10, while Columbus is just under 3 scored and sitting in the low 3s against, with a gap in the wrong direction that adds up to -22 over the season so far. That difference might not sound dramatic when you are scrolling an app, but stretched across 40-plus games, it tends to show up as those 1 or 2 we almost had it losses that separate a playoff chase from a lottery conversation. The market is not exactly being coy about how it views this matchup either. Utah is sitting around -170 to -180 on the money line, Columbus around +150. And that usually goes hand in hand with a puck line of Utah -1.5 at plus money, which is the sportsbook's way of hinting that the most common winning script has the Mammoth finishing more than 1 goal clear. You do not have to accept that story blindly, but it is a useful snapshot of how oddsmakers weigh form, talent, and schedule all at once. Speaking of schedule, that is where things tilt even harder. Columbus is on the second half of a back-to-back here, and not just any back-to-back, but one that includes getting ground down by Colorado at altitude the night before, which is a little like playing a full game while someone gradually turns up the resistance on the exercise bike. Utah is rested, at home, and on a 4 wins in 5 stretch, with a home record of 11-7 to 1 that tells you they have settled into this Delta Center setup pretty quickly. Fatigue usually shows up in the legs first, and in hockey that can be the difference between closing a gap and watching it widen when you try to chase the game in the third. Stylistically, these teams do not live in the same neighborhood when it comes to how they defend their own blue line. Utah allows far fewer shots per game than Columbus, sitting in that "we squeeze you and make you work for every look" category, while the Jackets give up over 30 shots a night and often look like they are trying to plug 3 leaks with 2 hands. On a fresh night, that might be survivable. On tired legs, with a team that already leans on its goalie a bit more than it would like, that gap in shot volume has a nasty habit of turning a 1-goal deficit into an empty netter game at the end. Personnel-wise, Columbus is missing some of the depth that makes a road dog dangerous. Miles Wood and Isaac Lundestrom are both on injured reserve, officially listed out through at least mid-January, which takes away some of the bottom 6 energy and penalty kill support that helps a team hang around in these spots. Utah's side of the report is cleaner, with Alexander Kerfoot sitting in that day-to-day, game-time decision bucket, which is very different from having multiple forwards confirmed out. Honestly, when you blend the situation, the travel, the way Utah suppresses chances, and the way Columbus is trending on this trip, you get a picture where the more likely outcome is not just a home win, but a home win that clears the number the books have drawn. As our first pick for this matchup, the Utah Mammoth money line is our full game side pick. The total is sitting at 6.5 with the under shaded, which is the market's way of saying, yes, these teams can score, but the default setting here is something closer to a controlled game than a chaos festival. If you look at their season arcs, that checks out. Together, their average goals scored and allowed hover right around that 6-goal neighborhood, which is exactly the kind of range that makes a 6.5 feel big enough that every blocked shot in the third starts to matter. Utah's whole defensive personality leans into a slightly quieter scoreboard. They keep shots against in the mid-20s on most nights. They get steady work from their primary starter in net, who has a goals against average in the mid-2s and a save percentage sitting right around 90%. And they tend to drag opponents into a style where you have to work through layers instead of trading rushes. That kind of structure matters more than people think when you are talking about a number like 6.5. You do not need an elite defensive masterpiece for an under, you just need the game to lean toward earned chances instead of open ice everywhere. Columbus brings some built-in volatility, sure, but even there the recent signs push more toward a respectable grind than a track meet. They have been finding it tough to finish in this stretch, and getting shut out 4-0 by Colorado the night before is the kind of result that can make a coaching staff lean into simpler, safer hockey on the second night, especially on the road. Think shorter shifts, more chips off the glass, line changes instead of long offensive zone cycles, and fewer high-risk east-west plays through the middle. All of that quietly bleeds scoring chances out of a game. Fatigue also tends to squeeze offense before it destroys defense. Tired legs mean you arrive a half step late on the rush. That shot sails into the goalie's crest instead of the corner, and what could have been a 2-on-1 becomes a harmless dump and a line change. Utah, rested and comfortable playing with structure in front of their goalie, is usually happy to let that happen, stacking up clean breakouts and patient possessions instead of forcing a fast pace. You end up with the kind of script where a 4-2 or 3-2 style of score feels more natural than a wild 7-5 kind of night. So when you put it all together, the total that first looks inviting for an overbetter suddenly feels a touch high once you account for Utah's shot suppression, the steady goaltending on the home side, the back-to-back spot for Columbus, and the tendency for this exact game state to settle right in that tight 6 goals or fewer band more often than not. Here is the thing, you never get certainty with a hockey total, only a stronger or weaker lean, and everything in the current data and situation points to the lower side being the more reasonable way to approach this number. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Washington Capitals versus Nashville Predators. Sunday night in Nashville, you have one team that looks like it finally knows exactly what it is, and another that feels stuck in that awkward are we good or not phase. Washington rolls in at 23-16-6, carrying the profile of a group that has built a real cushion in the standings, while Nashville sits at 20-20-4, which screams coin flip over a full sample more than it screams contender. Those season-long numbers under the hood back up the eye test too, with Washington averaging right around 3.3 goals per game and giving up just under 2.8, and Nashville living closer to 2.77 goals for and 3.33 against, which is not the kind of math that usually makes bettors feel cozy on the home side. If you picture this like a long road trip, Washington is that car humming along in the fast lane with the cruise control set, and Nashville is the one that keeps drifting between lanes, solid 1 minute, and then suddenly slamming the brakes. Here is where it gets interesting for the spread. Washington is not priced like some monster juggernaut. It is a modest road favorite around the mid-100s and 30s on the money line at most books, and FanDuel is hanging that -137 for Washington and +114 for Nashville, which implies roughly a 60% edge for the visitors once you peel back the juice. Nashville does bring a real home ice push, though, including that recent stretch where it stacked 6 wins in 7 games in this building before getting blanked by Chicago, and you can feel how much that crowd wants this team to be more than just average. Even with that, the broader picture still tilts toward Washington, with the better goal differential, slightly stronger underlying shot profile, and the kind of 5-on-5 consistency that coaches love to pretend is boring, while secretly sleeping better at night. And if you care about what the models think, NumberFire's probability sitting just under 62% on Washington winning fits the story pretty neatly, like an extra voice in the room quietly agreeing with the market. There is always room for Nashville to ride emotion, special teams bounces, or a hot goaltender to flip this script, because hockey is rude like that. But when you put together the season-long edge, the way Washington tilts the ice, and how the books are lining this up, one side does end up looking a little safer against the spread than the other. As our first pick for this matchup, the Washington Capitals money line is our full game side pick. Some sportsbooks have the total number at a flat 6 with the over shaded slightly, while others, like FanDuel, have moved to 6.5 with the under favored, which tells you the market cannot quite decide if this lands in the tidy 6-goal pocket or spills over the edge. The season scoring profile for both teams explains the hesitation. Washington games average just over 6 total goals when you factor in that 3.29 for and 2.78 against, and Nashville games live in that same general neighborhood with roughly 2.77 scored and 3.33 allowed, so you are hovering right around that key number before you even think about game script or weird bounces. Recent form adds a bit of drama too, because Washington has had some track meet nights on the schedule, including a 7-4 type of scoreline and a 5-1 result in its last handful, while Nashville has bounced between low-event grinders and those oh no, everything went wrong defensive outings like the 6-2 result in Edmonton. Special teams help keep the ceiling high. Nashville's power play is strong enough to matter and its penalty kill is decent, which means more of those swing moment chances where one whistle turns into a momentum surge, and Washington's penalty kill sitting in that lower tier adds volatility instead of calming things down. You also have both sides dealing with some notable absences up front, which on paper should lean things toward fewer goals, not more, and Washington is skating this on the second leg of a back-to-back after that win in Chicago, a classic spot where tired legs sometimes trim a little off the offensive sharpness, even though the impact on totals can be messy and tough to quantify in a clean way. On the other hand, that same back-to-back dynamic can stretch benches, lead to tired mistakes, and create extra odd man rushes either way. And if this game stays close deep into the third period, the empty net dance is sitting there waiting to turn a modest scoreline into something bigger in the final 90 seconds. So when you line up the full season scoring rates hovering around 6, the shakier defensive environment on the Nashville side, a Washington group that still finds offense even with a few regulars out, and all the chaos that special teams and late-game situations invite, it nudges this matchup toward a particular side of that total number rather than away from it. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Vegas Golden Knights versus San Jose Sharks. You have one team that feels like the seasoned card shark at the blackjack table and another that is the fearless newcomer splashing chips, and they both know each other's tricks by now. Vegas comes in playing that steady, methodical brand of hockey that wears on you, even when it does not look flashy shift by shift, while San Jose leans into chaos, energy, and a kind of joyful recklessness that only a young, confident group can pull off. The funny part is that both styles work. Vegas has quietly built the best record in the Pacific, even while juggling injuries to big names and being forced into a next-man-up mentality, and San Jose has turned a rebuild into something that already looks like a real playoff push. The history between these two, though, is not subtle at all. Vegas has treated San Jose like a little brother who never quite wins the driveway game. 10 straight wins in the series and a 30-2-5 all-time record is not just a trend, it is a psychological weight, especially when you have already eaten a 7-2 loss in this exact matchup just a couple of weeks ago. San Jose knows that, the fans know that, and Vegas absolutely knows that. When one team keeps cashing in like that against you, it changes how both benches react to every swing, every bad bounce, every whistle. Here is the thing, the market is giving you a pretty clear picture of respect for both sides. Vegas is priced as a road favorite in roughly the -170 range. San Jose sits around +140, and that is in a building where home ice has actually meant something to the Sharks again this season. That sort of number is not the disrespectful "this team is terrible" line. It is more like the book saying, "We know you are good, San Jose, but we still trust Vegas more when push comes to shove." And honestly, given how these games have gone recently, that is hard to argue with. Vegas keeps finding ways to tilt these meetings in the same direction, whether it is a big first period, a late push in the third, or a special team swing at exactly the wrong time for San Jose. If you zoom in on how these teams actually prefer to play, the picture gets even more interesting. Vegas is comfortable in the boring parts of the game. They are fine with pucks chipped deep, a low-event second period, and a constant grind of matchups where their top guns, their veteran forwards, and their blue line just slowly squeeze the fun out of you. Even with injuries, they still roll out one of the most balanced forward groups in the conference and a defense that, when healthy, has legitimate top-pair quality. On the other bench, San Jose thrives when the game opens up. They want long shifts for their skill, rush chances, cross-ice passes that drive coaches insane but make the highlight reels, and a power play that has turned nights like the Dallas win into a fireworks show. But style means nothing if your legs are gone. Both teams are playing their second game in as many nights, and fatigue is not just everyone is tired, it shows up in specific ways. Heavy legs on the backcheck, lazy clears that do not get out, and penalties taken because a defender is half a step behind instead of on the right side of a stick. San Jose at least gets the simpler travel spot. They stayed home for that wild win over Dallas, while Vegas has been bouncing around, already working through a busy stretch that has tested their depth in net and on the back end. Fatigue can favor youth, and the Sharks have plenty of that, but it can also reward structure, and structure is very much Vegas's brand. Goaltending is where the gap really starts to feel real. With Hart out week to week and Adin Hill still unavailable, Akira Schmidt has stepped into the main role and quietly given Vegas very solid numbers, right in that you can win a lot of games with this guy territory. He does not have to be a superhero behind this roster, he just has to be reliable, and that is exactly how his season reads so far. On the other side, Askarov might be one of the most entertaining goalies in the league to watch right now, but entertaining and relaxing are not the same thing for a coach or for your wallet. He has stretches where he looks unbeatable and stretches where pucks are flying in from everywhere, and his overall goals against and save percentage numbers sit in that fun but not exactly comforting neighborhood. In a matchup that already leans toward Vegas on talent and track record, the steadier crease belongs to the road team. San Jose's improvement this season is absolutely real. They score over 3 goals per game. They roll out a power play that has nights where it looks outright nasty, and a teenager is leading them in goals and points, which is as fun as it sounds. But they still carry a negative goal differential, they still live with defensive breakdowns, and they are still patching together their back end and middle six with a lot of tape, guts, and coaching. Vegas, even with its injury list, has more ways to win this specific kind of game. They can lean on their star forwards, they can clamp down in the neutral zone, and they have repeatedly shown they can go into this building and walk out with the points. Put all of that together, and you have a matchup where the number is asking a simple question. Do you really want to step in front of this particular truck in this particular series on a night where Vegas still has the better goalie, the tighter structure, and the deeper playoff resume? The Sharks are ahead of schedule and absolutely dangerous, but there is a difference between dangerous underdog and team you trust to snap a 10-game head-to-head skid on tired legs against a division leader. For me, the answer lines up pretty clearly on one side of the board. As our first pick for this matchup, the Vegas Golden Knights money line is our full game side pick. 6.5 is not just a random total number slapped on the screen. It is a statement about how the market views pace, finishing talent, and, just as important, goaltending volatility in this matchup. You have two teams that both sit right around that 3 goals per game mark on offense, but they get there in different ways. Vegas does it with a deep lineup, layered scoring, and a power play that can punish mistakes. San Jose does it with a top unit that can absolutely run hot, with Celebrini as the engine, Toffoli as a finisher, and a supporting cast that likes to attack in waves, especially at home. Here is the thing about totals in these back-to-back situations. Everyone talks about tired legs, as if that always kills offense. Sometimes it does, but tired legs also mean lazy clears, slow changes, and penalties when sticks get a little high or feet stop moving. That is catnip for a game with two dangerous power plays, especially for a Sharks team that just put up 4 power play goals in a single night against Dallas. If both benches are a half step behind, it is rarely the defensive structure that benefits, it is usually the shooters. San Jose's defensive situation is a huge piece of the total puzzle. They are missing or nursing injuries to multiple regulars on the blue line, including Klingberg, Descharnes, and Mukhamadullin, and the mix behind them is a blend of kids, depth pieces, and veterans being asked to do a little more than they probably should. You can get away with that against some opponents, especially if your goalie steals a night, but Vegas is not the opponent you want to be scrambling your defensive pairs against. They are patient enough to wait for that one bad gap, that tired stick, that failed clear off the glass, and once the dam breaks, they have shown they can pile it on, like they did in that 7-2 explosion in Vegas. On the flip side, San Jose is not exactly showing up to this one with a pop gun offense. Celebrini is not just a fun story, he is driving one of the most productive rookie seasons you will see. He is leading this team in scoring, and he has already proven he can produce against Vegas even in lopsided losses. Throw in shooters like Toffoli, playmakers like Eklund and Wenberg, and the willingness of their defense to jump in when healthy, and you get a group that can absolutely put 2 or 3 on the board against anyone, even on a tired night. They may give up a lot, but this is not a low-ceiling offense anymore. Then there is the goalie dynamic. Schmidt has been good, but he is still getting a lot of work with hard out, and heavy workloads can start to show up in small mistakes, especially when the team in front of you is also getting worn down. On the other end, Askarov has the kind of profile total bettors secretly love: big talent, high variance. When he is on, he can ruin an over by himself, but his overall goals against and save percentage numbers tell you he has also had plenty of nights where pucks keep going in, even when the shot count is reasonable. In a matchup with this much skill and this much history of crooked numbers on the board, a volatile goalie on one side is not exactly a reason to expect a quiet scoreline. Do not forget the mental side either. The Sharks know they have not just been losing to Vegas, they have been getting lit up more often than not. When you are trying to finally beat a team that has owned you, the instinct is rarely to slow it down and make it a chess match. It is usually, we are going to come at them, we are going to prove we can skate with these guys, and we are going to give our crowd something to feed off. That mentality leads to stretch passes, pinches, forwards flying the zone early, all the little risks that can create 2-on-1s for you or for them. Meanwhile, Vegas is not the type to turn down transition looks. If the game opens up, they happily join the track meet, trusting that their finishers and their experience will win that kind of shootout more often than not. So you have 2 offenses that can score, a history of high event meetings, a banged-up Sharks blue line, a volatile situation in one crease, and both teams coming off emotional wins the night before. That is not exactly the recipe for a calm, tidy 3-2 game. It sounds much more like a script where the first period sets the tone, the middle frame turns into a bit of a special teams chess match, and the third period has at least one stretch where the ice tilts and the scoreboard starts moving again. If you tell this story out loud and then look back at a total of 6.5, it is pretty clear which direction that number wants you to lean. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.